U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson visits China and meets with President Xi Jinping. Mr. Tillerson also makes stops in Japan and the Republic of Korea. What major issues were addressed during this diplomatic mission? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has concluded a six-day diplomatic visit to Asia. He began his trip in Japan last Thursday, where he met with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Japan's foreign minister. Then it was on to Seoul, where he addressed the nuclear issue in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. He stressed a new U.S. approach to the DPRK, saying that, quote, all options are on the table. Over the weekend, Tillerson visited China and met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The American diplomat brought a positive message from the United States.
President Trump places a very high value on the communications that have already occurred between yourself and President Trump, most particularly the very lengthy telephone conversation where there were very good exchanges to improve the understanding of China's view of the relationship with the United States and President Trump's view as well. And he looks forward to enhancing that understanding and the opportunity for a visit in the future.
Chinese President Xi Jinping said cooperation between both countries is the best path forward. He's expected to meet soon with U.S. President Trump.
We need to make joint efforts to advance the cooperation between China and the U.S., and we believe that we can make sure the relationship moves ahead in a constructive fashion in the new era. I'm confident that as long as we can do this, the relationship can surely move in the right direction.
Joining me now here in the studio is a leading expert on U.S. foreign policy, the former U.S. ambassador to NATO, Volker. With us from Beijing is Qinduo Xu. He is a political analyst with China Radio International. Joining us from Tokyo is Takesato Watanabe. He is a professor emeritus at Doshisha University. And from Seoul, we're also joined by Eunjung Lim. She is a lecturer in Korean studies at Johns Hopkins University. Welcome to all of you to the show. Shinzo, let me start with you. Secretary Rex Tillerson has just been in China. He left there a short while ago. What did you make of this visit? What was achieved?
I think the visit in general is quite successful. What's really impressive is his characterization of this U.S.-China relationship. He says the relationship can only be defined by friendship and cooperation. I think obviously he received complete support from the Chinese side, especially Chinese President Xi Jinping, who praised his understanding of this very important strategic relationship between the two countries. And also he basically also characterized the relationship in this new type of a relationship between major powers. This is something advocated by the Chinese side. It can be featured as like non-conflict, non-confrontation, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation. So there is somehow, the impression of like a mutual understanding of this new pair of relationship between them. And also, of course, the Secretary of State Tillerson brought with him the very important task that is to set the agenda for the upcoming summit between President Xi Jinping and Donald Trump in early next month, actually. So I think it's quite substantial, his visit. Obviously, he achieved a lot in terms of the long-term and strategic importance of this bilateral relationship here.
Right. Ambassador Volker, Secretary Tillerson held a number of meetings while he was in China. He met the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. And during that meeting, he stressed the importance of the U.S.-China relationship. I want you to take a listen to some of what he had to say.
Since the historic opening of relations between our two countries more than 40 years ago, the U.S.-China relationship has been guided by an understanding of non-conflict, non-confrontation, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation. It is important that the leaders of our two countries engage in further dialogue to develop a common understanding that will guide our relationship for the next half-century.
Right. There are already tensions between the United States and China over the DPRK's nuclear program, its missile program, the deployment of the THAAD anti-missile program in South Korea, a number of other issues as well. But do you get the feeling after this meeting, after that telephone call between President Xi Jinping and President Trump, that these are two countries that can do business together?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's important to remember that we've had difficult issues with China going back long before the Trump administration. You can go back to Clinton, Bush 41, Bush 43, remember the shoot down of the airliner, and all kinds of things there. But we've been able to manage these things over time. It doesn't mean that we have exactly the same interests. But to the way we would say it in the U.S. is we're both grown-up countries. We have a lot of interests. We don't want to have conflict with one another. We are going to be pressing our interests, and we're going to be able to manage that over time.
Let's go to Seoul, to Eunjung Lim. Eunjung, during his visit to South Korea, Secretary Tillerson talked very tough on that nuclear program, on that missile program being conducted by the DPRK. Let's take a listen to what the Secretary had to say.
Let me be very clear. The policy of strategic patience has ended. We're exploring a new range of diplomatic, security, and economic measures. All options are on the table.
So that final comment there that the Secretary made, all options being on the table, concerns possible U.S. military action against the DPRK. What would South Korea make of something like that?
Of course, South Korea is a liberal democracy, which means we do have various different opinions even within our society, from very hawkish groups until up to a very progressive liberal group too. So those progressive groups will say that sanctions alone was not able to deal with this North Korean provocations, whereas those hawkish groups will argue that we might need to bring back the American tactical nuclear weapons or strategic weapons, or even self-nuclear armament might be necessary. So we do have a very various, again, opinions within the society. But the thing is, most of Korean people also do have frustrations about our unprecedented approaches, including dovish and pretty hawkish approaches as well. In that sense, probably in principle, we can be able to agree with Secretary Tillerson's views, but in principle, I really have to highlight this, but almost none of the Korean people wants to see escalation of violence, massive violence. So in principle, our view is we don't want to see any war in the peninsula. So from that perspective, I would like to say that, American approach about the military sanctions or military approach should be very cautious if you think about the South Korean sentiment.
Takesato, let's talk about the visit to Japan. Secretary Tillerson went there. He met with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He met with the Japanese Foreign Minister. In fact, I think this is the third meeting he's held with the Japanese Prime Minister. What did they discuss in Tokyo, and what did that meeting achieve, do you think?
U.S. Secretary of State Tillerson agreed to have the strong ties further between United States and Japan. And he met Mr. Abe and also Mr. Kishida for Foreign Affairs, and they agreed completely on this point because it is necessary for the United States to go to China with the concluding agreements between Japan, Korea, and the United States. This was the first mission of the State Secretary Tillerson. Second mission is that how you see United States leads Japan and South Korea to negotiate with North Korea with the help of China. This is the second issue the Tillerson wanted to proceed. Third one is that after these meetings, Tillerson wants to arrange better position for the top leaders meeting between Mr. Trump and President Xi Jinping. This is very difficult if United States does not pay attention to the importance of the core interest of the Republic of China. Sorry, People's Republic of China. So these are, you see, in the process of going to the amicable solution in the East Asian area. I think if the China and the United States can position correctly in the world order, his visit will be successful. But if not, it is very dangerous because our political, order in Japan is now very, very complex. These are the things that I don't foresee what is coming out of his mission.
Okay, Shindo, I want to get back to the Korean Peninsula. The United States will deploy the THAAD anti-missile system there. That is something that China is very strongly opposed to. And China has said that if that deployment is finished, then it could lead to a new arms race in the region. Why is China so opposed to THAAD?
Well, it's not really about the THAAD system itself. It's about the radar system that goes along with the THAAD system. With the deployment, this powerful radar system, it can monitor the military activities such as missile tests within Chinese territory. So that would be tantamount to a loss of defense capability from the Chinese side. So you see there's a break of this balance of power in the Northeast Asia region. So from the Chinese side, probably China will be somehow forced to do something to catch up with this increase of military power in the South Korea and U.S. alliance here. So that could lead to, let's say, a vicious circle of arms race in this region. And of course, there would be a response from North Korea and also possible response from Russia. And that would lead to the destabilization of this whole region. I think that is real concern from the Chinese side. And you see there's a strong response to the deployment in terms of the trade with South Korea. I think somehow it seems to me there's an underestimate from the South Korean side from the very beginning about the determination in Beijing to fight against the deployment of the THAAD system. That's why they go to the WTO basically to settle the disputes over the trade issue there.
Ambassador Volker, these concerns that we're hearing about there, how does the U.S. address them?
Well, I think they're hoping that China will take a more active role in dealing with the North Korean threat, which is the source of all of this. These issues are all related. When you have North Korea having developed a nuclear capability, testing more and more missile capability, and determinedly threatening, so it says, the United States, as well as countries in the region. I think, just as our Chinese guest was saying, people may be misunderstanding China's determination about the deployments in South Korea. I think for too long people have misunderstood U.S. determination about North Korea, and it is really reaching a point now where we need to see progress on this. And that's the source of the U.S. deployment. I think, again, these things can be managed through dialogue and through understanding of how we're going to approach issues, as we saw with Tillerson's visit to Beijing.
Right.
But this is a dicey situation.
Where does the United States go with this, Ambassador? Because there is a proposal on the table. It was made by the Chinese foreign minister, the so-called double suspension proposal that the DPRK would suspend its tests in return for a suspension of joint exercises between the United States and South Korea.
Well, we can't possibly do that because of the U.S. alliance with South Korea. We've got to be able to maintain our ability to work with our South Korean allies on defense, should that ever be needed. What we do think is possible is if we could have North Korea stop and reverse both its nuclear program and its missile testing program with Chinese assistance, that could open ways to actually de-escalate this sense of confrontation that's been growing. That's what we should be trying to do.
Okay, let's go to Eunjung Lim in Seoul. Eunjung, of course, domestic politics in South Korea right now, as you have mentioned, is very fluid. The president, Park Geun-hye, was recently removed from office. There will be a new president soon. Is it possible that a new president may decide that he or she does not want THAAD in South Korea?
Yes, you're right. Now the majority of Korean people got really embarrassed and frustrated by the Park Geun-hye administrations, who decided on the deployment of THAAD. So the Mr. Moon Jae-in, obviously he is now the front runner, but he also addresses his concerns about deployment. But still, he did not say he will reject the deployment. Rather than that, his party or his views are suggesting that we need to review the decision. So there are some possibilities of that kind of reviewing the decision done by the previous government.
Okay, we are going to take a break right now. More on the visit of U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to Asia in just a moment. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.